Coming up next on the Witness the World podcast, the Resume Whisperer.
Indeed, which is your biggest resource, quote unquote, for job finding, in my opinion, is one of the worst places to look for a job because one job posting on Indeed gets between 350 and 5,000 applicants. Most companies look at the first 100. So if you're 101 and you don't know the tricks to beat Indeed, guess what? You're out of luck.
The content here is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Any content here should not be construed as financial, medical, or any other type of professional advice. Good day, everyone. Welcome to episode 21 of the Witness the World podcast. My name is Ben Choi, and today we'll be heading to Eastern Canada. Our guest is a passionate headhunter, a professional speaker, and an author. He's been on a mission to help people find their dream job. Today, we'll learn about his personal journey, and I'll also get some tips and ideas on how we can best optimize and level up our career search. Josef Stetter, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure.
It's been great having you on here. So, Josef, I thought, it was great to have, someone like yourself here. It's really timely having you on, given, where we are in the job market. From my vantage point, I think, in certain sectors, we are now kind of shifting gears a little bit. Some sectors are, seeing less hiring, whereas others, we still see the job shortages out there. So we want to kind of go over that in this episode today. But before we do that, let's get a little bit about your background and your origin stories. And wondering if you could just kind of walk us through a high level, how you found your way into the career matchmaking game.
Start with, I didn't really know what I want to do when I grew up. So having or growing up with Jewish parents that very much were like education, 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 go get a good job. I started my path, well, obviously early on retail, but then finance because I studied economics, did finance for 7 years and realized I hate finance. I have no personal satisfaction. So I've switched careers 9 times and jobs 18 times along the way, and I got into recruiting. And in my first year in recruiting, I generated the company that I worked for or built for them $750,000 plus dollars. My Christmas bonus was cheese and crackers, and I was like, "What's this?" And the owner was like, "Well, the cheese is from Pusatteri's, which is a very high end frou-frou kind of grocery store." And I looked around and I was like, "Do I look like I'm 65 years old that I need cheese and crackers?" Sadly, the crackers were from Dollarama. And I was like, I billed $750,000 for you. This is how you're thanking me. Thank you. Bye bye. And kind of ventured on to open my own business. Life happened along the way. I was actually in Vancouver working for a company that owns approximately 65 private colleges. And I noticed that their career services was just atrocious. They just hired basically somebody that studied business in general, gave them kind of here's a photocopy of some of the sections of What Color is Your Parachute, which is a brilliant book. But I decided to take it up on myself to write them a manual that will help all of the graduates actually get employed. And my VP was intimidated that I could think for myself and basically threw me under the bus as part of, I can't believe you did this. And somewhere in between, I started kind of going to government agencies and giving talks and giving lectures. And I've had the pleasure of writing over 10 books now on the subject matter. I've helped over 11,000 people land their dream job now in as little as 2 days. And as a recruiter, I've been a generalist. So I've recruited in most, we'll call it professional industries in terms of white collar. And so I really understand what's going on in the market and what's going on behind the scenes because I've worked in IT, engineering, accounting, finance, banking, construction, higher level stuff, pharmaceutical. So because I've been exposed to such a variety of things, and because I've invested over 30,000 hours now to mastering everything there's to know about job finding, I've become the resume whisperer along the way.
That's a great name, the Resume Whisperer. And you spoke a little bit about like the job market, and that's kind of where we like to get in there. So thanks for your overview. And so let's dive in here. So like I mentioned at the start there, it looks like the job market and the economy kind of in a transition phase to some degree. And during the pandemic times, a lot of people they quit their jobs, tried something different, and there was seemed like there was more, people had all these options, and it was in their favor. The employers had to pay more, salaries went up in some cases, but now I think things are starting to shift there. So just wondering, yeah, what is your sense of the market in general? Do you see that same shift, or maybe you see other things that are on the horizon?
So I think there's two parts to the statement you just made. The first part is that because of the pandemic, a lot of people's head has kind of grown very big where they want conditions for employment. Like I had one person that was offered that was making 120 and was offered 180 with a 25% possible bonus, and he rejected the offer because he was required to come into the office once a week. Once a week. And so a $60,000 raise, that's half your salary as a raise, is quite significant to come into the office once a week. So when you kind of have an attitude of, no, I will not come into the office, I will only work remotely, or I'm entitled to this, or you owe me that, then yes, there is a shift in the job market. Uh, the other part of it is, and again, depending on how you're looking, but the other part is broken into two parts. Right now in North America, and I'm counting the United States and Canada, there's approximately 50 million people that are unemployed. There's 50 million people that are severely underemployed, meaning have a university or college degree, but work at McDonald's. And then there's about 30 million people going through some sort of education or retraining. And from the trends that I'm seeing in the next few months, there's a possibility that another 25 million people will lose their job, especially in the United States. That's a target market of, let's say, 155 million people. Indeed, which is your kind of biggest resource, quote unquote, for job finding, in my opinion, is one of the worst places to look for a job because one job posting on Indeed gets between 350 and 5,000 applicants. Most companies look at the first 100. So if you're 101 and you don't know the tricks to beat Indeed, guess what? You're out of luck. Okay. Now, because of the explosion of AI, are some of the jobs and their functionalities changing? Yes, right? The pandemic proved that, like what big organizations have wanted to get rid of cashiers for a very long time. Pandemic proved that in implementing self-checkouts works. People are doing it themselves, and therefore they don't have to pay cashiers, so they can cut their workforce and make a lot more money. So some of the more, we'll call it mundane jobs, there is now, I think, McDonald's already has 5 fully autonomous McDonald's. There's not a single human, like there's one human being that works there to supervise that all the machines work, but literally the robots make your entire meal as long as you're not, overly customizing it. And it's a standard, I'll take a Big Mac fries and a drink kind of thing, in and out. And there's 4 of them, and it's proving to be very successful. So are you going to have part-time jobs in places like McDonald's in 10 years? Probably not. It'll be harder for students, but they'll have to be more creative. They'll have to kind of show more skills in other areas. So an area, for example, that is going to boom in the next 20 years is anything with the word environment in it. When Trump was in power, very quietly, the Dakota pipeline was being built. And the same was happening in Canada, where from the Alberta, kind of from Alberta to Ontario, they built a pipeline. And so the amount of pollution, the amount of after effects, you might not see it today, but it's coming. And so anything with the word environment is going to be massive. The way the technology is booming, obviously anything in the realm of technology, in terms of coding, in terms of quality control, in terms of robotics, is going to continue to explode for the next 20 years. So there are things that yes, we can automate, but again, in right now there's a massive shortage of um, skilled labor. And so the skilled labor is something that most people that that are in high school, I'm going to be 46 years old in 7 days in a week exactly. And when I grew up, skilled labor was like, oh, skilled laborers. But there's skilled laborers that make more, like you can be a roofer and make more than a banker starting out quite a bit kind of thing. So, electrician, plumber, a lot of people didn't consider those good careers. They're actually more in demand and pay more than your typical, I went and got a university degree, 4 year degree starting in the white collar professional job. So it depends on how you look at the job market because it's a mixed bag.
You mentioned the AI bit, the technology bit there, and this is just a thought that I've been thinking of over the last many years that, no matter what industry you do, what kind of work you do, technology it's coming. It's always going to advance, no matter what function you have to serve. So is that going to be part of the way of being for everyone? You have to embrace technology. You have to constantly learn technology. Like every day, you got to take more in because some way, shape, or form, there's going to be an aspect of that in your job. So it's almost going to be like brushing your teeth. You got to keep learning the new technology, whatever's out there, because it's going to hit you one way or another, whether it's work or outside of work. Like we all have to embrace it. Is that kind of where you're thinking for the future?
Look, there's no doubt that technology is already part of our life. I mean, we're all addicted to our phones in one way or another, uh, but it's pattern recognition. So right, I think this year a Super Bowl ad for 30 seconds cost $7 million. You can spend $100 a day on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok in ads and reach 1 million people. So $7 million versus $100, it's quite a big a difference, right? There are certain things, and you'll notice that with most big organizations where a lot of people are also getting frustrated with that, is that you can create a manual. Let's say, take a look at your internet provider, your cell phone provider. When you call, most of their support is in India. And you're getting that kind of, well, this is exactly word for word the answer in the manual, rather than someone that can kind of give you specific insights because they're familiar with it. And yeah, it's cheaper labor and companies want to make money, so they're shifting from it. Part of what I do on the other side of things in terms of the recruiting side is to also go, it's culture. It's not just who has the most technical words on their resume, because with the exception of something like a brain surgeon and a few very, very, very specialized professions, let's say like microarrays and pharmaceuticals, you're not being hired strictly for your technical skills because, regardless of profession you are, let's say you're an accountant, if you write in your resume that you know how to do accounting or you know how to do financial statements, like, duh. I haven't met an accountant in the world that doesn't know how to do financial statements. And if they don't, how are they working in accounting? That's my question to begin with, right? So there's ways of, most people, when they write resumes, write very cookie cutter generic resumes. And so they make the same mistakes and then they send out hundreds of resumes and go, there's no jobs out there. No, there's jobs. You just don't know how to search for a job if you're sending out hundreds of resumes, right? So the five most common mistakes on a resume that most people make: number one, they use Times New Roman, Arial, or Calibri as a font. Why? Those are the default fonts on Microsoft Word. Those are the ones that everybody uses. Number two, you use the black circles or dots, your squares or hyphens as your bullet points. Why? They're default. And that's what we've been taught since careers in high school, and most government agencies kind of default to because they haven't bothered to update the information. Number three, they have a section called skills or career kind of information where they go, I have 5 years of experience or 10 years of experience. I'm hardworking, dedicated, committed team player with excellent communication skills. In 20 years of recruiting, I've met very few people that say, listen, I'm lazy, I'll show up late, none of my work will be any good, and I really hate people. Please hire me. not unless you're related to them or having an affair with them, that you can kind of get away with that. Okay. And so it's redundant to fill because your definition of hardworking, Ben, and my definition of hardworking are very different based on how you were brought up and your culture and background. And so it is from company to company. The fourth mistake is that people have chronological or functional resumes. And if you've switched careers or you've changed directions or you lost your corporate gig and now are working part-time at Tim Hortons, for example, what happens is most employers spend 8 to 30 seconds reading your resume, which means they look at the top third to the top half of your first page. If the first thing they see on your resume is Tim Hortons and you were an engineer, they dismiss you as an engineer because you're at Tim Hortons right now, which means you're not, like, even though you might have made it through the applicant screening, they're dismissing you because all they see is Tim Hortons or all they scan is Tim Hortons. Okay. And the biggest and worst mistake of all is that people write, I know how to do this, or I have experience with that. So I'm going to give you two examples to demonstrate how bad this is. So if you need to hire a receptionist and someone comes to you and says, I know how to answer the phone, I hope you look at that person in shock and go, really? A receptionist that knows how to answer the phone? I did not know that. Because unless they live in an igloo, a cave, or practice the faith of Mennonite, most people, at least in North America, know how to press the green button and go, hello, how can I help you? You know, phones or some sort of device to speak exist. Now, if a receptionist says to you, I know how to answer 60 calls a day with 12 different lines, I can measure 60 calls a day with 12 different lines. I cannot measure, I know how to answer the phone. Now, similarly, if I use an example from my career, I can say to you, Ben, I'm an excellent salesperson. I know how to do B2B, B2C, account management, relationship building, lead generation. I've done retail, I've done door-to-door sales, I've done car sales. I've worked in private education, I've worked in recruitment. I know how to do sales. I've given you a lot of jargon, which most people fill their resume sometimes with, not correctly though, in many cases. But I haven't really told you whether or not I actually produce sales. I just said I had a lot of sales jobs. That doesn't mean anything. Now, if I give you a real example, I worked for a private college that before I came in generated $530,000 in sales for the entire year. In 1 month, I generated $860,000 in revenue for them in 1 month. Anyone that's interviewing me for sales should go, wow, that's impressive. How did you do it? And as long as I can explain how I did it, I've just proven how good of a salesperson I am. The lingo is great for the applicant tracking system, but not when a human being interviews you. And the biggest problem that most people that are job seekers that feel stuck and are sending out 100 resumes is that they have a black and white cookie cutter resume with generic statements, and they focus on, we'll call it the action words like manage, direct, liaise, coordinated, rather than the technical words and the results that they produced, which is the biggest side. So if you've ever seen the movie Legally Blonde, when Elle Woods or Reese Witherspoon applies to Harvard University and to the internship, she gives a pink scented resume. And everyone looks at it and goes, it's pink and it's scented, but they remember it. Now, I'm not saying you need a pink scented resume, but if you take color on your headings, you change the font or the bullet, like go to Microsoft Bullet and pick the diamonds, pick the check mark, pick something slightly different. It breaks the monotony of the eyes. If HR gets this many resumes and they're flipping through it like this, literally like a deck of cards, adding a tiny bit of color to your heading, adding a different bullet, adding a different font will break the eyes from the normal routine that they see. So you're more likely to be called because you caught their attention in 8 to 30 seconds. Most people don't understand this. So, you know, my background, I have my logos in beside me. You'll notice that it's purple. If you look me up on social media, my color is purple. Purple is everywhere. Why? Because it's consistent branding. When I go networking, if I'm in an event, like I was just in an event where there was 30,000 people, I showed up with a purple shirt, purple bag. So when I followed the email, I said, I'm the guy in purple. I had the purple shirt, the purple bag. And then this is the conversation we had. They will remember the purple more than they will remember my name, especially with 30,000 people, right? But it's a way of branding yourself to be different, right? So even for you, your background, you kind of have the hands holding the world. And even if people don't remember the name, they'll remember the image. There's an association to the image, and therefore they'll look for that image in whatever platforms they can to find the podcast, for example. It's no difference in the job market. And so, yes, people that are saying, oh, there's no jobs, or no, there's jobs. There's plenty of jobs. You're not looking in the right places. You're wasting your time on Indeed. Like if you posted your resume, like a few tricks for your listeners on Indeed. If you posted your resume in March and we're now in July and you haven't touched your resume on Indeed, you're on page 7,000 of the database. Nobody sees your resume, period. Now, very simple little trick. Indeed, Career Builder, Monster, Workopolis, and most of the big job boards refresh their database daily between 11:45 p.m. and 2:45 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. So, depending on when you go to bed, and especially for you in Vancouver, you have more time for that. Go into your resume, press spacebar anywhere on the resume, and save it. The moment that you press spacebar, Indeed, and save it, Indeed goes, ooh, you've made changes to your resume. This is a new resume. Let's add it to the refresh of the database. So now, myself as a recruiter, if I'm searching for particular skill sets, when I get a new job order, I spend the first day, let's say, looking for a couple hours at resumes, and then I save the search and have it emailed to me daily. So if you've pressed spacebar, there's a good chance you'll appear in my inbox the next day as a resume that I didn't see initially because you were on page 7,000, right? So simple little trick like that makes a huge difference. Quantifying the results, because a lot of people assume that they can go to the interview and say what they've done, but they never get the interview. And here's why: because they look like everybody else, they're cookie cutter and generic. And so even the applicant tracking system has nothing to say this is different, right? But again, even with the applicant tracking system, most companies look at the first 100. The majority of jobs in North America say, don't call us, we'll call you. And most people wait. Call HR, tell them that your battery just died when you submitted the application, or that your internet's been wonky all day, or that you never got a confirmation. Can they please check that your application went through? The moment they check your application went through, you're now first on the list. Now you have 2 minutes to give your elevator pitch and say, here's one thing you need to know about me, why I would be awesome for this job. And then ask them, when are you starting to interview for this role? So if they say to you, we're going to interview in a week, okay, great. If I don't hear from you back in a week, can I have permission to call you back to get feedback on my resume as to what was missing so that I have a better chance next time? Now you've planted the seed of how good you are because you've given an example that hopefully you've spoken results, not just, I know how to do this kind of thing. And you have permission that if in the first batch of 100 people, they didn't really get impressed by anybody, when you call them back, they will reconsider you for a call or for an interview because you've already planted that seed. So voila. There's how you can get jobs faster and easier without changing a lot.
Wow, those are some great insights there, Joseph. So a lot to unpack there, and yeah, some great tips there. So hopefully, all of us looking for work can kind of take away that moving forward. So one aspect I want to cover next is like the actual job search. You talked about, Indeed. You're just in the in the weeds with millions of other people. So you got to obviously stand out. The resume helps if you can just revamp that, look at it differently, differentiate yourself with, key deliverables that you produced, and then obviously spice it up with the make it look a little bit better. You could try the color pink or other colors maybe, but something different. If it doesn't work, then got to readjust. So those are my main takeaways. So yeah, good points there. So on that note there, like when we're doing the search aspect of it now, so we're talking Indeed and then all those job sites, but there's other places like LinkedIn and employment agencies. I guess kind of like your company, you get your job recruiters, you're helping out. I've dabbled with, the bar, chat GPT, kind of curious how that kind of does like produce like job results. It's kind of a work in progress from my understanding of it right now. Any other approaches that maybe most people wouldn't think about besides, those
So
typical ones? I'm curious to know, like, anything
yeah,
comes to
so the
mind?
formula should be like this. In your job search, I would say that 10 to 15% of your job search should be job boards because there's too much kind of like lost in the abyss, as you said earlier, in terms of millions of applicants, but it is a resource nonetheless. Then 25% of your job search should be employment agencies, recruiters, headhunters. Why? Because they already have relationships with companies. Now, you should register with a few agencies because I'm going to assume that some of them are not going to like you. They don't like your name, they don't like your accent, they don't like your age, they don't like your particular background, whatever. Obviously, we're Canadian or North American, we're very polite, and we're not going to tell you why we don't like you. We're just going to ignore you or dismiss you for whatever reasons. But if there is a few that do like you, they tend to work on the same job orders because companies that are working with agencies will use multiple agencies to try and get people faster. So if you have two or three agencies recommending you to one job, you're more likely to get interviewed there. The next 25% should be LinkedIn. Now, on LinkedIn, again, I've seen some horrible LinkedIn profiles because, like, for example, I was talking to a CFO who basically had CFO, the name of the company that he worked for, and his and how long he's been there, and then previous job CFO, how long he worked for there. And I looked at him, I said, have you done mergers and acquisitions? Have you done complex transactions? Have you done complex financial modeling? Have you done investments? What elements of a CFO have you actually done in your career? Just because your title is CFO does not necessarily mean that you know how to handle particular things, because there's a difference between a CFO that knows how to acquire other companies and look at all the finances versus a CFO that's handling investment portfolio versus a CFO that is looking just at how much money the company's making. And so if your LinkedIn is generic or does not have information on it, you're doing yourself a disservice. So your LinkedIn has to be optimized with the right technical words and the right results that you've produced in it. And if you don't know how to do that, I definitely help with that. 25% of your job search should be networking. Okay. Networking and referrals. So going to events. So things like, let's say, the Board of Trade or Chamber of Commerce of a city, right? The Project Management Institute. Why? Because those are high level individuals that usually attend there. And so it opens the doors. But the biggest mistake that you can come is go to a networking event, go, ooh, you're a director. Here's my resume. Can I get a job? No, you haven't earned the right. You have to build a little bit of rapport. You have to kind of get to know them a little bit first before you jump into I need a job. You have no idea how many times I've been to networking events where people walk by me and go, oh, you sound important. Can I have your card? Like, sure. Not even my name, not even nothing. They just take my card. And then the next day they send me an email and go, I got your card at the networking event. Here's my resume. Can I get a job? I'm like, I don't know you. I mean, unless your resume is spectacular, and again, in most cases they're not, then there. I was in Ottawa. I was in an event, ironically enough, called Networking for Nerds. Okay. And it was mostly like software developers, techie people. And I came in and there was three or four individuals that seemed to know each other, having a conversation. So I politely kind of approached and kind of listened in and kind of joined the conversation. And they were all technical writers. And they were kind of mentioning that, they're here trying to find leads for getting more gigs as a technical writer consultant. And I kind of looked at them and I was listening to them and I said, okay, do any of you have some of samples of your technical writing on LinkedIn, for example? And they looked at me with the biggest arrogance, like, no, why would we do that? Because someone's going to steal our content. And I said, but if you're not sharing samples of your writing, I'm not saying the whole document, but at least samples, how are you getting referrals? Because you're at an event called Networking for Nerds, trying to drum up business. So at the bare minimum, you should be at events such as a Board of Trade event or a Project Management Institute event, because those are leaders that have the authority to hire. Networking for Nerds is individuals that work for companies that don't have authority. They might be able to tell you who the director is for you to send them an email, but that's not necessarily going to get you hired. And they kind of looked at me like, well, what makes you such an expert? And the way they said it rubbed me the wrong way so much that I just looked at them and said, let me see. I've written 10 books. I've been in recruiting for nearly 20 years, working with companies like Deloitte, Tata Consulting Services, Acon Constructions, Apex Pharmaceuticals. So small to global clients, kind of all around. I've written 20 manuals for companies, right? And I've personally helped over 11,000 people land their dream job now in as little as 2 days. And I've been published in various magazines, such as Disrupt Magazine and Bazinga Magazine and Brains magazines. That's what makes me an expert. And as soon as I said that and they kind of understood my credibility, one of them actually turned around and wrote, like, what were you saying that we need to do about LinkedIn? And, can you clarify that? But again, LinkedIn can be a phenomenal resource if it's used correctly. And you need to make sure that, again, you're not giving me generic, yes, I'm an engineer kind of conversation. Then the remaining 15% or so that is left should be creative opportunities to find a job. Meaning, for example, go and buy a box of donuts and send it to the department that you want to work with. Put your resume inside the box of donuts. Pay a window washer to glue your resume on the outside of the window. Go at 5 a.m. to the offices and print your resume, and the newspapers that are being delivered to the executive, put your resume in each section, for example. So there is ways and there's script for how to kind of get a job that does not have a job description yet, where you're creating your own job description. Those are the best jobs to have because you get to dictate the working conditions, you get to dictate the work, you get to dictate the pay. But most people don't do this because it takes a little bit longer. Napoleon Hill, when he wrote Think and Grow Rich, talks about this, going the extra mile a lot. And, one of the examples there was a big store where an old lady came in, and one of the clerks that was responsible for putting merchandise on the shelf, he wasn't even a salesperson, came and saw her and asked if she's okay. And she said, it's raining outside, it's cold. I just came inside the store to warm up. And he went and he grabbed her a chair and said, well, if you're going to sit here, I just want you to be comfortable. Here's a chair. A month later, the old lady called and said that she wants to furnish her castle with furniture from the store under the condition that the shelving clerk does the sale. And the kind of store was like, but he's not a salesperson. He doesn't know anything about sales. She's like, if you want this sale, you will send him to Scotland to furnish the castle. And the sale was so big that he ended up becoming the VP. Now, the old lady was Andrew Carnegie's mother. Andrew Carnegie started the U.S. Steel Corporation. So he in standards of today, in 1930s or so, was already worth $1 billion, given U.S. Steel Corporation at the time owned 80% of all steel production in the United States. Okay, now more kind of recent example, and one of my mentors, there was a security guard that worked in North Bay, in the mall, and he would come into work 15 minutes early. He would always be smiling. He was always positive, very energetic. He would open the doors for people. If he saw garbage on the floor, he would pick it up. If he saw that the customers had a lot of shopping bags, he would help them carry it to their car. If he saw that the merchants were bringing in new inventory, he helped them bring the inventory to the store. And the owners kind of sat and looked down from like whatever, the fourth floor of the mall, looking at this, and saw him. And they called him into the office and say, "Why do you do this?" And he said, "Listen, I'm here for 8 hours a day. I might as well enjoy my work here. I might as well kind of, I don't like garbage in my house, so I don't want to see garbage in my work," for example. They were so impressed with his attitude and his spirit and his energy that they offered to pay for his entire education, including his MBA, so that he can come back and manage the entire mall for them. And as a society, we have forgotten the importance of going the extra miles. And the pandemic has made people angrier and more short-tempered and what's the word I'm looking for? Unappreciative of others. You know, we're just, because we were, I don't know if it's because we were locked up. I don't know if it's there, but the level of anger that people have, the level of impatience. Like, I live in a family-friendly neighborhood, and I live off a main street, and people are, trying to go 140 in a 40 zone to get to the traffic light 2 seconds faster than me. Like, there's traffic lights. You can't really go that, especially in rush hour traffic. So in rush hour traffic, you're zipping in and kind of there for what? So that you can get to the light 1 second faster than me? Like, seriously, right? You hear about all these like stabbings and shootings on the subway and the SkyTrain, and it's a, for what? For somebody took your seat, or for, like, it's crowded and somebody bumped into you, and we've lost the art of conversation. We've lost the art of humanity. And this is why so many people are also struggling with jobs, because they're only basing it on, I'll send it through technology, and I've sent a lot, so technology will work in my favor. So different.
I see. Well, a lot of great insights there, Joseph. And the word I comes to mind is like I think people have forgotten is like being grateful. And we'll ask you about your thoughts on that at the end of the podcast. But yeah, every day, I try to like, hey, what I'm grateful for. You start the day off right, and then you get into the right mindset for anything, work, life, whatever, right? So yeah, that's just great insights on LinkedIn, the job search, and that sort of thing. So I like to kind of pivot over to the next phase. So let's say we've used all of Joseph's techniques. We've got ourselves a job interview or two, and then it comes down to how to prepare for the job interview. And over the years, I've heard about this method called the STAR method, which you might have heard of. It's called like we focus on the
Yeah,
situation,
situation, task,
pass.
action, result.
You got
There's
it.
the
You got
SMART
it.
method. There's the
Yeah.
ADA method. They're all the same. Like,
Yeah. Yeah. So I was just wondering, yeah, like, is that the right approach of one of those kind of methods to explain a situation, what you've done, your results, basically mirroring what you're putting on your updated resume with all the tips that you've given, but be consistent with that, follow through with that info, but verbally on the interview process. It's essentially being consistent with that and give more examples and more color, essentially. Is that generally how to kind of go about it to ace the interview?
in its simplest form, yes. The reason being is, like I said, 8 to 30 seconds reading your resume, which means they haven't read your resume. I was, after 9/11, I was downsized from Fidelity Investments, and I applied to Invesco, formerly known as AIM Trimark. And the HR is interviewing me. And she's like, "It's great that you've done all the back office and you understand the industry and you're licensed, but have you ever worked in a call center? And I turned around to her and I said, if you flip to page 2 of my resume, I actually worked in your call center for 6 months, right? On top of the call center experience I had, but oh yeah, there it is, kind of thing. So yes, you have to repeat what's on your resume because even though it's in writing, no one's hiring you because it's in writing. And similarly, we now more and more depend on applications to find us matches to do a dating match, like to meet people that you might not normally meet, depending on where you hang out or what it is that you do. But I don't know of anybody that went, oh my God, you wrote you love walking on the beach. Let's get married. Right? Without a conversation, without any follow-up there. Now, I will add that yes, the STAR, the ADA, the SMART, whatever other acronyms exist, they're all great. It depends on your personality. But the one thing that I will emphasize that needs to occur more is confidence. Okay. If you look, and because I made the comparison to dating, if you were to approach a woman, go, hi, hi, can I get your number? Your chances might be slim to none. The reason I say slim is because the woman might be physically attracted to you, so she'll give you a little bit of a chance to impress her. Okay, if you go to a job and go, please, please, please give me a job. I'm really hardworking. One of two things will happen. One, they won't hire you because you don't have confidence in yourself. Or two, they know you're desperate. So they'll hire you, but they won't offer you any money or they won't pay you what you're worth. So make sure that you practice or kind of evaluate your confidence. Envision that you already have the job. I don't know, Ben, in your career, have you ever been promoted?
Yep, definitely.
Right. So when you were promoted, did they come to you and say, Ben, tell me about yourself? Or did they say, Ben, you're doing a really good job. We'd like to give you a little bit more responsibility, a little bit more money. Are you interested? Right. So it's usually the latter where we'd like to give you more responsibility, more money. If you come in with a mindset that you already have the job and the interview is just a formality, just like you getting promoted, then you're going to portray more confidence in your abilities, in your results, in why you have something to offer that other people do not. Okay. It's a model of looking at it not from here's my story, because you don't want to be robotic. You want to have personality. Smile. It releases endorphins. It'll help you relax, right? Make it a conversation. So here's a situation. I jokingly say most engineers and accountants aren't known for their bubbly personality. When engineers go on a date and they go, I'm working in quantum physics and thermodynamics, calculating the discombobulation of whatever, most women will go, uh-huh, that's nice. Because they don't understand. Unless that person's on a date with an engineer and understands the lingo, they don't understand that lingo. But if a mechanical engineer says, I've been working on this problem for 3 months, it's been driving me crazy. I finally figured out how to solve it. And I'm so excited because it's such an awesome solution. Everybody can understand that. If you do the same thing for the job and say, as a mechanical engineer, I worked on this problem. It was very complicated because I had to deal with these variables. Here's what I did to potentially approach the problem. Here's how I solved it, and here's the results it produced. You're now different than every other engineer. And you've earned the right to be the standard for every other interview. So again, I have a program called Land Your Dream Job Now that teaches this to people. And what I've done to make it easier for people is I've done the homework for them. So my program has 8 modules. The first module is your resume. So I've provided 15 templates of resumes that have gotten people hired in as little as 2 days. I've given you 15 cover letters from very cookie cutter to very outside the box. Okay. I've explained to you the psychology and the kind of formulas of great resumes. Then there's a section on how to beat the job boards, and very specific. Like I gave a couple tips here, but there's more to make sure that people notice you and they see you on the job boards, right? Then there is how to work with it. So not only did I tell you how to beat the job boards, but I've researched the top, let's say, 250 job boards in Canada and the top 300 and plus in the United States. I've given them to you already. Then here's how to work with employment agencies. I've given you the top 300 agencies in Canada and the top 350 agencies in the US. I've done the homework for you. You don't need to tell me, I don't know where to start. I've told you where to start, right? Here's how you, let's say, optimize your LinkedIn profile. Here's how you network correctly, what to wear, what to say, how to follow up. Why? Because most people go to a networking like, oh, can I get a job, please? Hi, can I get a job, please? You know, so change the formula. Here's the script for you to create a job just for you that doesn't exist. Here's ideas on how you can creatively approach the job finding. Here's what you need to know, the psychology of salary negotiations. Like, if you understand how much you're worth and how good you are, nowadays you can negotiate working from home, you can negotiate extra vacation, you can negotiate raises, you can negotiate gym or health memberships, you can negotiate daycare, you can negotiate car allowance, you can negotiate a car. Like my craziest negotiation, I helped somebody get a $450,000 raise in 4.5 hours. Right? So it's possible. It does exist. Like obviously that doesn't happen every day. That was a one of a kind, but boy oh boy was it a kind of an experience kind of because it goes to show value. May I share the story?
Absolutely. Let's hear it.
So I had a guy that was a financial controller for a company that does blank CDs and DVDs. And again, we're going back, I would say 15, 20 years or so. He was making $65,000 a year with a possible $20,000 bonus. For 5 years, his employer refused to give him a raise because they weren't making enough money. Now, when I interviewed him, like loved his personality, I sent him to one of my clients that does custom surround sounds, before it became so popular where like everything inside the wall, there's no wires, everything is to a touchpad kind of thing for houses in Toronto area that are a minimum of $2 million, basically. So very, very high end stuff. My client loved this guy. Asked me, what is he making? I told him 65 with a possible bonus of $20,000. Because goes great. I'll give him $85,000 base salary and $25,000 bonus to come work for me. Told the candidate the good news. Candidate quit. Within a half hour of quitting, his boss came into the office and was like, you can't quit. You're too important to this company. What they offer you. So he told him 85 and 25. He's like, okay, wait here. Came back within, we'll say for simplicity, a half hour. I was like, okay, we'll give you a base of $120,000 and $30,000 bonus to stay here. Now, again, 5 years, they did not give him a raise. All of a sudden now they're doubling his salary. He called me up. He's like, listen, I've worked here for 10 years. I know all the employees. I know the routine. They just doubled my salary. I'm like, I can, but do you think they're going to treat you better or worse now that they've doubled your salary? Because, 5 years, they haven't given you a raise. Again, there's a sense of comfort. I called my client, told him what happened. My client's like, what they offer him. I told him. He goes, okay, fine. I'll give him a base of $160,000, $40,000 bonus. Called the candidate, told them the good news. Candidate quit again. Within 45 minutes, the entire leadership team of the company came into his office, were like, you're not allowed to quit. You're the only one that understands what's going on here with the numbers. Okay. What they offer you? He told them. They all went out, came back 45 minutes later and said, we'll give you a base of 200 and $10,000, $40,000 bonus to stay here. Or sorry, $200,000 and 2% ownership in the company. You'll make $250,000 a year. Called my client, was like, okay, this company just kind of made a counter offer that's insane. He asked me what they offered. He goes, okay, there's something about this guy. I really love him. I'm going to make him my right hand man. I'm going to give him, and this is my final offer to him. If he doesn't take this, he's an idiot. I'm going to offer him a base of $265,000 and 9% ownership in my company. In his worst year, he'll clear over $500,000. That negotiation took 4.5 hours in Canada. And I told the Canada, I'm like, this guy doesn't even know you. He's just kind of come back at you 3 times and he's thrown insane amount of money at you. Think about how well he's going to treat you and how well you're doing. And that was that. That was the negotiation. 4.5 hours, most stressful 4.5 hours of my life, probably, because my commission, kept slipping through my fingers and coming back, slipping through my fingers, because obviously as a headhunter, that is a very big deal. It doesn't happen every day, but I've helped people through my program get a $30,000 raise or $40,000 raise because they speak differently. They have a different level of confidence. They have a different level of present. Like I have 7 rules to a wow interview. You follow these 7 rules, you can get any job you want. And I have, because I test my program regularly. So one of the stories that I always share, my brother was finishing his 3rd year mechanical engineering, applied for an internship. By the time one of the companies responded to him, it was going to be more of a paper pusher job, and he already registered for his 4th year classes. So he decided to ask me to cancel the interview. I decided to go in as my brother to test how much I know about this stuff, because the only thing I know about mechanical engineering is what I wrote for him on his resume. My first interview, there was 100 students from 4 major universities in Ontario. Within 45 minutes, human resource called me back, said, we love you. We need to come back for a second interview. I was like, all right, let's see how far I could take this. My second interview was with the manager of the department that I potentially work in. Now, I spoke the truth about my brother's resume. My brother was on a team that designed a wheelchair for third world nations that uses a tank chain, so you can go on any terrain. Came second in Ontario for the best mechanical engineering project of the year, won $500 from a major bank, told the manager I studied thermodynamics and quantum physics. To this day, I don't know what those are. Okay, didn't even leave the parking lot. Manager called me and said, I adore you. I need to come back for a 3rd and final interview. Out of 100 candidates, I made it to the final 3. I was the first one in at 8:30 in the morning. Manager walked over to me and goes, here's your offer letter. The job's yours. All you have to do is pass this mechanical engineering test. I looked at him. I looked at the test. I looked at him. I looked at this. I'm like, I can't do this test. Manager looked at me and goes, I know you're nervous. Let me help you. He solved the first 2 questions for me. I looked at the manager and I'm like, listen, I am so sorry for wasting your time. I guess I'm a lot more comfortable with the design than I am with the calculation. I am not the right candidate for this job. Thank you for the opportunity. Manager followed me to my car and begged me to take the job because I'd interviewed that much better than every other mechanical engineer. So I've devised a system that pretty much covers 97% of all interview questions. The reason I say 97 is because Google has a tendency to ask some very unusual questions that are not necessarily work related, but just how you solve problems or how you think. So with the exception of very specific personality questions, and again, I do those myself, most of the tell me about this job, give me an example of this, how would you do this, what would you do in this situation, my system gives you results. I've basically created a system where I've given you the psychology and the skeleton of the interview. I teach you how to add the meat and then add the spices so that you don't sound like, oh, okay, using the STAR method, my situation was this, my task was like, again, it's embedded into the system, but it's embedded in a way that you sound like a human being and you sound like yourself, not you've tried to memorize the answer to make sure that you hit all the right things.
Well, that's a excellent story there, Joseph. So, you talked about the mindset psychology. That's, I mean, confidence is, like maybe that's 50% of the battle right there, or maybe even higher percentage. And it's funny, I've come across, so many people over my life, working life that, they're disengaged, they're, negative. They get caught in that, limiting belief cycle that they want to try something different, a new career, but maybe some financial things, other things that are holding them back. And, just on that note, I mean, I was wondering, like, is there maybe some kind of an inspirational message that you could share with those people that are just kind of stuck in that rut there? And, there is something on the other side if they go out and explore, because for mindset wise, that sort of thing, there, anything that you could provide some
Oh,
inspiration to?
yeah, I'm going to use one of my mentors, Dr. Obon Bowen, who says, "You are a master because you are a piece of the master." Right? God created you, or God gave you life, or Allah, or Buddha, or whoever you believe in, gave you life because you have a purpose on this earth. And the more you understand that you might have not achieved what you wanted to achieve because maybe you've fallen off the path of what your purpose or your passion is. Okay. Steve Jobs said, if you find something you love, you'll never work a day in your life. And so it's not just about like, one of the things that I do when I interview people, I often ask them the SCI question: security, income, growth, or happiness? Which one would you put first?
Should be
So what
happy.
is it for you?
Should be happiness. I think I would start
So
there.
if you're
Yeah,
driven by happiness,
yeah,
you're not going to be
yeah.
driven by salary. You're
Right.
going to be driven by the fact that you're doing something that matters to you. So again, um, culturally speaking, and may I ask what's your cultural background? I'm not going to make assumptions.
I'm 100% Canadian, but my parents are from China. I was raised here
Okay.
all my life. Yeah.
So using and I wanted to make sure. I mean, based on the name, I assumed, but I didn't want to there. So I used to teach in Chinese like weekend schools, public speaking and debate, where the kids are there from like 9 to 6 Saturday and Sunday, and they start them as young as like 7 years old and up to high school or whatever. And I'm the type of person I love to laugh. I love to have fun. And I would allow, especially the younger kids, 10 years old, to take my white markers or my markers for the whiteboard and draw poo and laugh hysterically. And I would show them funny videos. And the parents would sit outside my classroom and they heard all this laughter, and Chinese culture, not so kind of ready for laughter in school. And they complained to the principal that there's too much laughter in my class. And they were worried that their kids are not learning. Principal was like, told me this. I'm like, tell the parents to come into the class and sit there and watch what happens. In an 8-hour day, the kids were able to write 5 speeches, memorize them, present them, give feedback, and still laugh. And the parents were shocked at how much they retained by me giving them mental laughter breaks, for example. And even though they saw how much results I produced, they kind of went to the principal and said, okay, yeah, we get laughter is important, but can we do less laughter? And I look at the principal and said, you can fire me. I'm not doing any less laughter. This is how I teach. And the principal's like, you're one of the best teachers here. Every kid adores you. So no, we're not firing. Right. I'm like, then tell the parents are going to have to get used to laughter. So understand that, let's say Chinese culture, a lot of times in Jewish cases, a lot of time there's that you have to be, there's a great movie called Three Idiots that is in Hindi, I believe. It's out of Bollywood, where it's three guys that go to engineering school. One of them ends up being a photographer, one of them ends up being an engineer, and one of them becomes a phenomenal scientist that kind of creates inventions and so forth. But this whole like, you have to do this, you have to do this, you have to do this. A lot of times the parents don't ask kids, what are you passionate about? What matters to you? And so when you find that out, you will excel, become an expert and authority because your passion there. Steve Jobs also said, God rest his soul, that, you know, if you go to work and too many days in a row, you wake up and go, oh, I have to go to work. It's time to switch. It's time to change. Right. So find things that you're passionate. And again, just because you've had a great career, if you're not passionate about it, find out why. Is it the people you're working with? Is it the role, like you're not challenged anymore? There's an adage in English that says the moment you stop learning is the moment you start dying. In anything, whether it's a relationship, whether it's work, if you go to a job and you're like, I know everything here and I'm bored out of my mind, that's it. You've tuned out of the job. So you need to refresh. You need to maybe work in the same profession, but in a different department. You need to kind of figure out what will inspire you or challenge you. And so there is a model where there's plenty of jobs out there. If you do a great job of marketing your worth and communicating that in an interview, possibilities are endless. The offers can be much more than you expect, right? And there's a level of don't just use one resource. Don't just go on Indeed because you're wasting time and energy and you're missing out on resources like agencies that can get you there faster because they have insights to give you on companies or what those companies like on your resume or what they expect in an interview so that you have a higher chance of getting hired because agencies make commission to place you. And so it's in their best interest to find great people and place them because that's how they make money. Now, you might be great, but you might not be there in terms of presenting it. So they might give you a few tips like rearrange your resume this way or add this to your resume or say that. And all of a sudden you're getting that amazing job offer. So to me, it's more about being proactive, being confident, and using a wide variety of resources. You know, we ask our friends and our families to recommend a restaurant or recommend a movie, but we're terrified to ask them about, hey, can you recommend me to a job? Can you recommend me to this? And here's the irony in that. Most companies have a bonus incentive for the employee to recommend people they like. Because if that person that they recommend passes probation, which is usually 3 months, sometimes 6 months, the company will pay, let's say, if you recommend me to a job, they will pay you anywhere from $300 to $2,000 for recommending me. So there's an incentive for you because if you and I get along, you're bringing people that you want to work with, which will make your work environment better. But we don't take enough time to ask for those referrals.
Got it. Yeah, thanks, Joseph. Yeah, a lot of great, again, a lot of great insights there. And yeah, I learned a lot here. I thought, something I never thought of. So yeah, thanks again for opening our minds up. And I hope that everyone will kind of take that from this podcast as well. So as we kind of wind down this podcast, I alluded to this a little earlier. I want to ask a two-part question to cap things off here. So what are you most grateful for, and what are you most looking forward to in the future?
So similar to what you said earlier, I have gratitude every single day for being alive, for being married, having two beautiful kids. That's my why in terms of what I do, because I want to create experiences for them and opportunities for them to enjoy every aspect of life and every aspect of following their dreams. And again, my goal is to personally help over 1 million people land their dream job. And I also am working on ways of making the experience of looking for a job easier and faster for people, especially in North America. But I haven't dabbled or researched enough about Europe or Asia or anything like that. But obviously, once it's done correctly in North America, it's very easy to replicate that around the globe because even though there might be certain variables that differ, at the end of the day, unless you're a brain surgeon, where you can be the most arrogant person alive, but if you're a great surgeon, that's all they care about, You're not being hired for how technical you are. You're being hired for fitting into the culture and the needs of an organization, right? So I'm working on creating ways where I can streamline so that, in essence, instead of applying, I'm kind of go, here's the job that you're matched for, and here's how which ones you're most matched for. You know, you can kind of pick and choose, go to those interviews, get hired, and the cycle becomes shorter and easier. And like I said, there's a lot of people that think they know and understand looking for a job, but if you're looking for a job for 6 months to a year and you've had one or two interviews and nothing's happened, you don't know how to look for a job. It should not take that long. That's the simple reality. Like I have a 90% average of finding anybody employment in any field in under 3 months. Most of the time it's 2 months, but again, as little as 2 days. So, and I'm thankful every day for opportunities to be of service, to go on podcasts like yours, to Witness the World podcast, and to share my wisdom in a level and in a way that even if nobody uses my services, they go, oh yeah, he said quantify the results. Let me quantify it on my resume, and for them to progress on their own, because that's the way that you leave a legacy behind.
Well said, Joseph. Yeah, thanks for that. So, for our audio only listeners, where in the internet realm can they find Josef Stetter?
So my name is spelled Joseph with an F, so Josef, not PH, right? And then Stetter, all social medias, that's pretty much you can find me, josephstetter.com. Again, I'm very active on all social media, so you can find me at the end of the day, podcasts like yourselves. My name's mentioned for the visual. Obviously, my logos are behind me so that you can find me. But the easiest way to remember, I think my last name, if you think of the word stutter, but with instead of a U and an E. So I'm Josef Stetter, but no U, E. So Stetter. There you go.
Perfect. Thanks, Joseph. We'll be sure to add those details to our show notes. So that's a wrap for episode 21. If you like this podcast, please give us a thumbs up or hit the subscribe button below. If you didn't like this podcast, give us a thumbs down, but please do tell us why with a comment below. If you have any other feedback, comments, or suggestions, you know what to do. Thanks for joining us, and namaste, everyone.